Hello, my name is Jett Smith, and welcome to a video on my channel all about how to do original oratory in competitive speech and debate. This video will help you understand, prepare for, and succeed in OO as a speech event, and it is the first part of my how-to speech series, unless you count my communication analysis video from a couple years ago, but we only do that in Idaho and in college. So what are we going to talk about in this video? First, we'll discuss the logistics of what oratory is, how to write one, and then how to get it performance ready. That's kind of the three major ideas of the video. We'll begin with what oratory is. We'll talk about its rules, the norms of original oratory, how it's judged, some good examples, how to choose a topic for your oratory speech, researching your oratory, outlining an original oratory, fleshing out the writing, editing the writing, memorizing your speech, and rehearsing and delivery. And it's important to note that you'll be doing 10, 11, and 12 kind of over and over again throughout the rest of the season, but 1 through 9 is kind of just getting it ready for your first competition. And we'll finish with some resources for original oratory and my final thoughts. So let's begin with what original oratory is. Now, OO is a persuasive speech that is composed by the student. The goal of an original oratory is to convince the audience to change the way they think, act, believe, behave, or perceive something in themselves or the world around them to address a social problem. So the textbook definition from the National Speech and Debate Association is very similar, but this is what it says. By identifying and examining social problems, we expand and open up the floodgates to change. An original oratory is a speech that addresses a social problem, is written and memorized by the performer, and is no more than 10 minutes in length. Above all else, an oratory should reflect maturity, intelligence, wit, and hopefulness. So putting those two things together, original oratory is a competitive speaking activity, one of the oldest that is still competed in the United States. And now that we kind of have an idea for what it is, we'll talk about the rules. Now, the rules are very limited for original oratory. Even though there are a lot of norms that are kind of expected for you to follow, you are not going to be accused of breaking the rules by a competent judge as long as you do these things. Now, number one, the general purpose of the speech is to persuade. Any other purpose, such as to inform or entertain, shall be secondary. So you can inform and you can entertain, but it is not the main purpose. Second is contest. This contest comprises of only memorized orations actually composed by the contestants. No visual aids are permitted. So you have to actually write it yourself. You can't hire a private speechwriter or have your coach write it for you. And unlike informative speaking and a couple of other Idaho events, you cannot just use visual aids. Third is the subject material. Any appropriate subject may be used, but the orator must be truthful. Any non-factual reference, especially a personal one, must be so identified. What does this mean? If you tell a story that didn't actually happen to you, you have to say, this didn't actually happen to me. Same thing, you can't make up a story about a person and pretend like it's real. You can have a hypothetical or a fake story and then admit that it's faked, but you can't make one up and pretend like it's actually real. Fourth is length. The time limit in original oratory is 10 minutes with a 30-second grace period. Should a student go beyond the grace period, the student may not be ranked first. The ranking is up to each individual judge's discretion. No minimum time is mandated. So as long as you're not going above 10:31, you won't get a penalty. And even if you do, the only penalty is that you can't be placed first. And key thing here, judges have their own discretion as far as how they should rank. There are some good materials that teach judges maybe how to use their discretion more wisely, but it is up to the judge. So our goal when preparing an original oratory is to be as strategic as possible and as inspiring as possible to make sure that the average judge, if you're looking behind the veil of ignorance of any type of judge, would be the most likely to rank this speech first. Fifth is quotation. No more than 150 words of the oration may be direct quotation from any other speech or writing, and such quotations must be identified in a printed copy of the oration. Extensive paraphrasing from other sources is prohibited. So what this means is you're not supposed to use other people's words for more than 150 words of the speech, but that doesn't mean that you should be paraphrasing more than 150 words either. Now, are they going to be checking at most tournaments for if you're paraphrasing too much? Probably not, but the intent of this event is original oratory, not just a combination of other people's words. If you want to do that, then you should try interpretation. Sixth is the script, the written copy. The orator script must identify the quoted materials, state the number of quoted words, include a works cited page in APA or MLA format, and both the orator and coach must attest by signature that the oration is the original work of the contestant. So once again, you have to write the speech and then perform the speech. It is not impromptu. It is not extemporaneous. You cannot make it up as you go. You are supposed to be writing a speech word for word and memorizing it word for word, and it has to be your words for word, except for the quotes. And paraphrased and summarized materials not to exceed around 150 words. Lastly is reuse. A student may not use an oration the student used in district or national competition in any previous contest year. So if you used an OO at a previous year's tournament, you cannot use it again the next year. So those are all found from the Unified Manual from the National Speech and Debate Association. Now, some states have their own individual rules that are different from the national ones. So always check your state organization as well. But if it comes to the national qualifying district tournament and the national championship tournament held every June, those are the rules that you've got to follow. What about the norms of original oratory? These are the things that are not rules. You will not get disqualified or any formal penalty for not following these. However, these norms are so common and well understood in original oratory that if you don't follow them by accident, then you are likely to at least have a chance of getting ranked lower or getting fewer points. And you can purposefully break these norms if you are trying to critique them, but these are just things that you should keep in mind. The first overall norm is that we need to be professional in original oratory. OO is the event that people will think of inspiring public speaking, like I have a dream style stuff is the most relevant to original oratory. So what does that come with? There's an expectation to dress business casual to business official or professional a lot of the time, that you're supposed to use clean, proper language, and that you should steer away from too controversial of topics. All of those things are up for debate and up for discussion and critique in oratory, but they are expectations that are pretty strong. Second is that you need to think bottom up rather than top down. This is persuasive speaking rather than argumentative speaking. And while arguments are part of persuasion, we're typically in oratory talking about things that the audience is capable of being persuaded to do. And if your audience is high school students and parents and coaches that are judging, then the things that you can persuade them to do are very different than the things that you could persuade politicians, members of Congress, the president of the United States to do. So while political solutions are welcome and legal solutions are welcome and allowed, there is a strong norm of expecting your solutions to be tailored to actionable items for members of the audience. And the last norm is to use one of the commonly accepted structures. Now, you probably know that most public speeches expect you to have an intro, 3 points, and a conclusion, and oratory is no different, but that's not in the rules. However, there are three main point or 4 main point structures that are very common in oratory. Most of the time, it is either introduction, causes, effects, solutions, conclusion, or introduction, problems, causes, solutions, conclusion, or introduction, prong 1, prong 2, implications, solutions, conclusion. There are definitely people who have had lots of success and lots of inspirational messages who don't use those exact structures, but they are so common that most people expect them at this point. And if you are enjoying this video, before we move on to the next part, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I've got a lot of great videos planned to come out hopefully before summer ends, including how you should handle both prepared and impromptu topics in World Schools debate, how to flow no matter what type of debate you do, and the next 2 speech videos that I'm planning on doing are for informative speaking and after dinner speaking. The after dinner one is done in a lot of different states, but it will be specific to the rules that are in Idaho. So if you have other ideas for videos that you'd like me to do, please comment them below and maybe I'll make them into a video. How is original oratory judged? Technically, according to the rules, it is always up to the judge's discretion, but there are things that different speech organizations would like you to do to encourage judges to be more likely to vote for you. So the 3 judging guidelines given by the NSDA, at least on their blank oratory physical ballots, and that frequently appear on tab room descriptions, are importance, relatability, and originality. So first up is importance. Is the topic significant? Is the thesis clearly established? Does the delivery assist in establishing the importance of the topic? So that is the first criteria that you're judged on according to the NSDA. Second is relatability. Can the audience relate to the topic? Is the delivery personable? How does the speaker establish how others are impacted by their topic? Is the rhetoric of the speech inclusive? And then lastly is originality. Does the speaker address the topic in a unique, inventive way? So while delivery is part of multiple of these different things, the focus of judging an original oratory should be more on topic development according to these guidelines. You also have our supporting examples new and interesting under originality. These all come from the sample comment sheet of the NSDA. I have made my own 5 criteria that I use to judge original oratory, and that I would like my state to adopt, and that I coach my kids through to get them to make their speeches as appealing as possible. The first one is persuasion. Does the speaker convince and call the audience to take action using a variety of persuasive techniques, including the establishment of credibility, evocation of emotion, and use of logic? So to me, if it's a persuasive speech, the first thing we should be judging you on is your persuasiveness. Second category is content and organization. Does the speech's content encompass a memorized, organized, and compelling introduction, set of main points, and conclusion? Third is vocal delivery. Does the speaker exhibit strong vocal communication skills through their rate, pauses, projection, and vocal variation? Fourth, physical delivery. Does the speaker exhibit strong physical communication skills through their body language, focal point, movement, facial expressions, and gestures? And finally, fifth, topic development. Does the speaker make a unique topic selection and or take an innovative approach to a common subject while demonstrating societal significance, personal importance, and a focus angle on their subject matter that makes full use of their allotted time? So there's a lot that goes into original oratory, and I wanted to make it as simple but comprehensive as possible for judges to be able to holistically evaluate speeches, which is why I made these 5 criteria. If you'd like to see an even more comprehensive breakdown of these that basically gives you a 10 out of 10, a 9 out of 10, so on and so forth on each of these categories, then you can click on the resource that I've linked both here and at the end of the presentation. So fifth, what are some examples of good oratories? Now, there's not enough time or enough ways to get around copyright for me to be able to show you those exact different forms during this video. But what I can do is give you some titles of original oratories and link to a Google Doc that has 20 plus examples of original oratories that are on YouTube that I will continue adding to as I find more of them. Now, I tried to have at least a handful of examples for every structure of oratory that I could find. So for problems, causes, and solutions, surprisingly, I couldn't find any examples of NSDA finalists on YouTube that use this structure, but I could find finalists from state championship tournaments that did use this structure, so I put those on there, but I couldn't find the title of those speeches. For causes, effects, solutions, that's the most common one that I found for NSDA finalists on YouTube. Some of my favorites are Leave Me Alone, The Tragic School Bus, and Let's Try Something. And then next up for the prong 1, prong 2 implication solutions, or the P2IS system, you can look at America Minus the Dream, my favorite oratory of all time, Surfin' USA, and The Longest Street, all as examples of the prong 1, prong 2 implication solutions format. Lastly, if you want examples of what it's like when you don't use one of these formats, there are 3 that I found online. I'm a Private Person, For Crying Out Loud, and Disrespectful all take different approaches and structures to original oratory, and Disrespectful critiques these norms of always having to follow a certain structure as part of their content. I've attached a link to the Google Doc with the 20 different examples here and at the end of the video. I would highly recommend watching as many examples as you can find, not necessarily of speeches that are similar to your topic, but just speeches in general so that you can see what makes a winning oratory and you can copy the homework and change it a bit. Mostly when it comes to their delivery, their use of humor, their use of rhetorical devices, their structure, not their content, because the content, of course, and the way that you deliver your content should be original. Sixth, and kind of the first step of what most of you might think of as writing an oratory, even though the other 5 steps are even more important, is choosing a topic. Now, when you come up with a topic, instead of thinking of it as just a subject, think of it as a societal problem. That is the starting point of every good oratory. And a societal problem is an issue in our culture, our attitudes, our behaviors, our structures, our concepts as human beings that are meaningfully and negatively affecting a significant portion of the population in your city, your state, your region, your country, or even the world. So how do we come up with a topic this big about societal problems? Well, I've got 2 main strategies, one on this slide and one on the next, for how you can find those topics. One strategy that I like to use with my students is to ask yourself, what are 5 things that you love about the world, 5 things that you hate about the world, 5 things you wished the world believed, and 5 things you would change about the world if you had the power to do so. So I went ahead and did this, and this helped me come up with 20 different things that could serve as the foundation of topics. The other thing that I like is a lot of the times there'll be similar issues that pop up across multiple categories, and that tells you that something related to them is very important to you. So maybe it'd make a great topic. For me, 5 things I love about the world are music, board games, my family, reality television, and my pets. 5 things I hate about the world are anti-LGBTQ attitudes, dishonesty, lack of empathy, fat phobia, and narcissism. 5 things that I wish the world also believed is that learning is lifelong, not just in school, that divorce is not evil, that oldest siblings are not parents, that capitalism isn't inevitable, and that hard work does not get you rich. What are 5 things that I would change about the world if I had the power to do so? 1, I would adopt a 4-day work week. 2, I'd send everybody to therapy. 3, I'd mandate speech and debate education in schools. 4th, I would equalize domestic labor in families and relationships. And lastly, I would make parents go back to school to see what their kids are doing. So if those strategies don't work, or in addition to those strategies to help you find a topic, you can also ask yourself these 4 questions. What scares or worries you? What frustrates or angers you? What bothers or disgusts you? And what saddens or upsets you? You can also ask what makes you happy or joyful, but we want to kind of focus more on these negative emotions because they are more likely to lead us to a societal problem, and the goal of an oratory is to address a societal problem. So some examples that I came up with were declining literacy or reading levels scares me. The male loneliness epidemic being blamed on women angers me. Extreme wealth and income inequality disgusts me. And parental neglect and mistreatment of their children saddens me. So those are all things that I could use to help me come up with topics related to societal problems. So for each of the societal problems that you come up with, you should ask yourself the following 6 questions, because these will help you determine whether or not it is a good avenue for you to write a speech around. First up is why me? Something that you are genuinely interested in, passionate about, and are personally connected with will make a great topic. Something that was just suggested to you or has worked in the past by other competitors does not properly answer the question, why me? Next is why now? You have to make sure that this topic is timely and relevant to the audience. Third is why them, as in the audience. You have to make sure that this topic will be relatable and inclusive of the people that are going to judge you. Fourth, why this topic specifically and not others? How is this topic going to be inventive originally enough? As in, how are you going to make it unique if it's been done before? Or is it just unique because it never has been done? How are you going to make it digestible or approachable or understandable by the average audience member? And how are you going to make it clear when you only get 10 minutes? Fifth is why invest? Why choose this topic to not just have, an impromptu and extemp speech about, but something that you will research, prepare, think about, write about for an entire season. Make sure that the topic has enough depth to explore and that it's researchable. And lastly is why bother? Is this topic something that is potentially solvable and hope-inducing for you and for the audience? If all you're going to do is find a problem that is incapable of being solved, made better, or mitigated, then that might not be the best use of your time for both your mental health and for the audiences. Once I've asked myself these 6 questions for any of the problems that I've come up with, a lot of them will struggle to answer at least a handful of these questions. So I'll take the 5 strongest societal problems that have been able to answer these questions decently well, and then I will apply them to one of these topic templates. So topic templates are a way of phrasing the issue into a societal problem that brings the audience into it. So here are the different types of templates that I've come up with and an example for each of them. We are too X, as in we are too self-centered. We don't know how to X, as in we don't know how to relax. We aren't X enough. For example, we aren't honest enough. We overvalue X, such as we overvalue skinniness. We undervalue X, e.g., we undervalue domestic labor. We are obsessed with X, as in we are obsessed with work. We misunderstand X as good or misunderstand X as bad, but it's actually the opposite. For example, we misunderstand socialism as bad when it's good. We oversimplify X, as in we oversimplify the male loneliness epidemic, or we have forgotten X, such as we have forgotten the importance of reading. All of these are examples of topics, and the opposite of each of these topics would also work as original oratory topics for many of them. So once we've got our 5 sort of topic templates, and you'll figure out which of those kind of formats makes the most sense, or you could even combine them or come up with your own. For each of your top 5 to top 3 topics that you're thinking about, you then need to check and do research for answers to these questions, because these are both the judging criteria that the NSDA provides and things that I think will just impact whether or not you're capable and willing to put in the work to create an amazing oratory. First up is validity. Is this issue real and impactful? Is there proof of it? Does it affect a sizable group of people meaningfully? Is it big enough to justify writing about? Second is harmfulness. Does the topic ring as significantly problematic for your audience? Is this going to be seen as a big enough issue by a big enough portion of the people that you are likely to be judged by that you will have enough of an onus to convince them that something has to change? Third is relatability. Is the topic as self-identifiable as possible for as many people as possible? What I mean by this is sometimes you have topics that affect a significant minority of the population. For example, transgender people make up around 1% at most of the population. This is a significant minority. So even though the likelihood is that most of your audience members would not be transgender, if you can make the speech as self-identifiable or as relatable even for people who do not belong to that social category, then the topic is still capable of being relatable. But talking about a problem that only impacts about 5 people that you can't relate to or analogize or compare to a more significant problem that affects a bigger portion of the population means that maybe the topic won't work. Fourth is depth. Can you find enough research, evidence, examples, support, real world happenings of this problem? Are you going to be able to dig deep and fill a 10-minute speech with this? Because really, the best oratory topics are the things that you could fill 10 minutes easily, and it will actually be more difficult to only talk about it for 10 minutes. And then fifth is digestibility. Is it easily understandable and approachable for broad types of audiences? Now, your topic can fail some of these questions or not have the perfect answer to them if the whole goal of your speech is to talk about something that is not necessarily digestible to certain audiences, or that is not necessarily relatable to the majority of people, for example, if that's what you're critiquing. But the more likely that your speech is to have positive answers to each of these questions, the more likely that it is that it will have the widespread appeal needed to convince such a huge group of people, which is any type of person that could be judging, to like your speech. So now that we've checked our topic templates, now that we've made sure that they answer these questions, you're probably down to 2 or 3 different things left that could make for a good oratory. What you want to do next is research potential solutions, preliminary research, and turn these societal problem topic templates into action statements. Usually it will just be the opposite of whatever your problem statement was. So for example, we must be less X. We must be less self-centered. We must learn to X. We must learn to relax. We must be more X. We must be more honest. We must reevaluate X. We must value domestic labor. We must let go of X. We must let go of overworking. We must better understand X. We must better understand the male loneliness epidemic. Or, for example, we must remember X. We must remember the importance of reading. So taking your topic template and then reversing it can help you kind of see if what you're going to be asking the audience to do is a good foundation for a speech. So now that you have your problem and your action statements, we're first going to turn those into a purpose statement for your speech of why are you giving this original oratory. And once you've seen a purpose for these different speeches, that's when we can develop them into a thesis statement. So beginning with the purpose statement, you're going to take the problem and the action statement and combine them to create a purpose. So it would sound something like, because society is, or because we are blank, I want to persuade my audience to blank. The first blank is the problem. The second blank is the action. That's what you want to do with your speech. That should kind of serve as your underlying motivation, your mission statement, your why that you're coming back to every single time that you think about this speech. But you're not necessarily saying that word for word in your speech. The thing that you would say is instead your thesis statement. You're going to take your purpose statement and then turn it into a thesis statement, which is an overlying concept for the whole speech that clearly lays out the problem you are addressing, why you are addressing it, and what you want the audience to do about it. So I have about 8 examples of different thesis statements that you can use, 4 on this page and 4 on the next page. All of these are not necessarily perfect, but they would be a starting point for a thesis statement that I could then develop into a speech. There are different lengths, different ways of phrasing them, and you can really, if you want to learn how to format your thesis statement really well, watch NSDA Oratory finalists. So here are some examples. We are so independent that we are becoming isolationist, so we must learn to connect instead of detach. I fear that our obsession with beauty has made life ugly, and therefore it's time to deprioritize aesthetics. My concern is that we spend so much time patting ourselves on the back for past progress that we're downplaying the problems of today, and that must end to create a better world tomorrow. If we keep looking to social media for proof that our lives are exciting and valuable, then we'll keep seeing emptiness and worthlessness. So let's look to create social circles instead. It's clear that the demonization of socialism is holding progress hostage, so let's free our minds. I'm afraid that the gender disconnect on the purpose of partnership is so wide that it's making love impossible, and that gap has to be bridged before romantic relationships sink. Our treatment of animals as fun accessories has led to their widespread abuse, and the need to take greater responsibility as pet caretakers, not just pet owners. And finally, I'm scared that failure to respect our offspring as kids is to blame for the parental estrangement of adult children, so it's time to bring families back together before they all fall apart. So, how can we choose among all of these different ideas that we've come up with for a final choice on a topic? If you're still not sure what to do after doing all of these other things, you just can't make up your mind, you could always, if it's during the preseason, write both or outline both, and then whichever one you think is stronger, go with that. Or if you're not a senior, you could say you'll do one this year and one next year. But here's my advice. First is look inward. What are your core beliefs? What would you want the world to look like if everyone else adopted that core belief? And which of these 2 topics helps you achieve that better? Second is to think big. If you had magical powers to change the social world as we know it, how would you change the world? This is the closest you're going to get to that power. So you might as well use it to do the thing you'd want to change more than anything. Third is to have fun. If a topic doesn't interest you, intrigue you, or inspire you enough, or if you think that you'll be miserable having to research it and talk about it all season, do not choose that one, even if it seems like it might be better in theory. And then lastly is to remember to make it your own. Can you say something about this topic that has not already been said before, or can you say it in a way that has not been said before? And if the answer is no, then you might not want to choose that topic. So now that we know what our topic is, because we've chosen one, or we're almost about to choose one, the next step is to research for original oratory. While oratory isn't debate and you're not going to be cutting cards, the truth is that an original oratory is a research project, almost as much as informative speaking is. But why do we need to research an oratory? There's a lot of different reasons. One, we need to make sure that our topics are sound and doable, so we're going to be doing research even before we finalize the topic. It's also because we need to become an expert. The more that you know about their topic, the better of a writer and performer you're going to be. Third, and fourth and fifth is that it helps us be more persuasive according to the rhetorical proofs. This helps us make persuasive arguments because we have the most qualified, credible people backing up what we're saying and giving us the best warrants. It also makes us stronger on pathos because we can have a better connection to the audience when we have stories and examples and real world implications that they can relate to that we gain from our research. And by using research, you show that you have thought about this, that you're an expert, and that you're trustworthy, all of which builds ethos. Sorry for the typo. We also need to do research to help us flesh out the speech and make sure that it lasts 10 minutes and we're not just yapping. And sources are often how we make the oratory original to us, which is interesting because you're getting sources from outside of yourself. But if you can use completely different sources with completely different examples than any other person who's done this topic before, then that is what will make you original compared to other people that have had similar messages. So when do we engage in the research process? We do this when we're coming up with, when we're choosing, and we're refining the topics. So research happens all throughout the season, but especially in the preseason and before we do any outlining, drafting, or writing. There is no point in outlining, drafting, or writing a speech that you have not proven can even work by research first. Do not write before you research. Do not write something and then hope that you can find research that agrees with you later. Additionally, we need to research throughout the entire season to help update our examples and our supports for claims, both to keep it fresh and just to make sure that we have the best stuff available. So, when do we need to use research in our oratory? This is not a hard and fast rule, and every speech is different, but a general starting point would be 1 to 3 pieces of evidence in your introduction, 2 to 5 pieces of evidence per each of your 3 main points, and maybe 1 new piece of evidence in your conclusion. Now, when I say piece of evidence, this does not always mean a cited source or a quote or something like that. Evidence or support or proof for an argument could be a personal story. It could be a pop culture reference. It could be a parable. It could be a general life philosophy. It could be a story from a friend, right? All of those are ways that we provide evidence for what we're saying. And you should have a decent amount of that in your speech from different places. So, where do we end up doing our research? How do we find research that is going to support the speech in the way that we need? There are lots more places to look than just Google, and there are lots more things to find on Google besides news research. So, first up is academic sources. These are really good for getting high quality information and standing out from your competitors as a qualified expert. You can read academic journals, studies, legal briefings, research papers, all of those things. You can also get your research from real people. You can read reviews of products or of movies and things like that. You can look at opinion polls. You can go online to forums to see what people are saying about a topic. You can look at social media. You can read people's blogs. Essentially, you're trying to get firsthand accounts, experiences, and thoughts from real people on the internet. You can also look at traditional media. Think magazines, books, and newspapers. In-person copies, especially if you're trying to prove a historical thing, can be great, but also there's in-person copies that people are less likely to have read. If you only find a source in print, then your audience is less likely to have heard of it before, which will make it more original. Fourth is personal experiences, not just your own personal experiences, but the personal experiences of other people. This could include your memories, the stories and memories of your family members and your friends, your teachers, your community members, all sorts of stuff like that. You can also look to entertainment media for examples and for, proofs and analogies. This could be movies, TV shows, songs and albums, music videos, plays, monologues, musicals, but also sports and like the physical or fine arts. Additionally, you can look to the news, and you probably will use at least 1 or 2 pieces of news sources. This could be local journalism, national news, international news, current events. And then lastly, I have miscellaneous media. You can look at philosophy as well as like psychology articles, cultural traditions, nursery rhymes, fables, children's stories, advertisements, historical events. All of those are things that you can get research from for your oratory. And your goal should be that you are going to have a balance of types of support for your claims. You should not have an oratory that is only using academic sources in the same way that you would not want an oratory that only used personal examples. So, what do we research now that we know what it is, why we do it, and where we would do it, and when we would do it? So, you need to figure out the different aspects of your societal problem, specifically what it is and the fundamental nature of the problem. You need to figure out what has caused or what are the origins or the foundations of your societal problem. You need to figure out the problem's effects, consequences, and impacts, and you need to learn how to solve, fix, or improve the future of the societal problem. So all of those are things that your research can tell you, because chances are, if you could think about all of the problems, all of the causes, and all of the solutions off the top of your head without needing to consult any outside resources, the societal problem you've picked is too simple or too small to warrant needing a 10-minute speech about it. Because as much as I'm sure you're very smart, if you've figured out all of this without needing to do any research, then chances are your audience could figure it out without needing to listen to a 15-year-old give a speech on it for 10 minutes. What should we be looking for in our research? We need to find real-world examples. We need to find scalability or proof that this problem exists outside of ourselves or on a large scale. We need to find connections to pop culture or other types of media, and we need to find warranted explanations by experts that prove our arguments. Additionally, we're looking for evidence and support when we research to help us do the following things: tell the audience about what we're talking about and then show them what we're talking about, to help us name, explain, prove, and impact each of our speech's points, to help us answer the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions that the audience would likely have about what we're saying, and to help us make sure that there is a balance of analysis, examples, and statistics. So, how do we end up doing research? First, we can evaluate our sources for currency, relevance, reliability, authority, and purpose. Whenever you find something and you decide that you want to use it, especially for news articles and academic articles, you need to make sure that it is recent enough to still be able to prove the claim that you're making, that it is relevant to your topic and the claim that you're making, that it is a reliable piece of information, as in it can be verified from elsewhere, and that the source you're citing also has sources a lot of the time, that whoever is saying it has the authority to do so, because using the authority, the credibility of your sources is a great way to build your ethos as well. And you also need to make sure the purpose of what you are finding isn't to sell something, unless that's why you're citing it, or to, mislead people or to help a certain political party or politician, but their goal is to just educate and spread information. After you find a source and you evaluate the source to make sure that it's worth using, you need to annotate it. This is where those annotated bibliography skills from your English class will come in handy. You should read a source, immediately cite the source so that you don't lose it, and summarize the source as well. If you don't cite it and summarize it when you're in this pre-writing phase, the likelihood that you lose it, or that you maybe write it down but then don't remember anything that it's about, so you either don't end up using it or you forget it and have to reread the source anyways, is very high. So summarize what you gained or what you learned or what you liked about the source. And then lastly is extract it. What I mean by that is pull the thing from the source that you like the most. Is it a quote? Is it a story? Is it an example? Is it a use of language choice, right? Is it the recency? Is it the author's credentials? Is it that it referenced another source you want to check out? So read a source, evaluate it, cite it, summarize it, and then extract the most helpful parts from it. When you're doing that, you have to be able to keep track of your sources. Make a separate document from the thing that you are going to be writing the speech on, and save all of these annotations and citations there. Keep a running works cited page as well of all of the sources that you're using at the bottom, so that when you have to turn in your official scripts, you can just copy and paste over the citations you've been using the whole time. You also need to vary your usage of different types of sources. Use quotes sparingly. Remember, you need to use less than 150 words. You can paraphrase evidence sometimes, and more often than not, you should be summarizing your sources. But remember, even though you can only quote 150 words, they don't want you to excessively paraphrase as well. So you can kind of include your paraphrasing in that 150 word count in your mind. You just don't have to include it for like the sake of following the rules on your prepared manuscript. You also need to organize your sources to make sure that it's actually easy for you to navigate, because you're probably going to find way more sources than you end up needing or using. So you can organize your sources in different ways. You could organize them by type, like from the types of sources that I had on the previous slide, by takeaways, like, ooh, I think all of these sources prove this same thing, or by purpose. What would I use this source for? Would I use it to establish a problem? Would I use it to help promote a cause, or would I use it as the foundation for a solution? You also need to avoid overusing sources. Remember, roughly 70% of what you say should be exclusively your own thoughts, ideas, and analysis, and around 30% should be from outside support. That's not a rule, that's just a recommendation, and it's not hard and fast. It's definitely nuanced and moldable. Who now do you ask for help with research? If you want to get feedback before you've even started writing on sources clarity, the power of a source, or the novelty of a source, you can ask your coaches, your teammates, or your family and friends. Send them an article, or screenshot the paragraph, or send the story that you're thinking about and tell them, hey, this is what I'm thinking about using it for in my speech. And if people aren't even liking the sources or the examples of the studies that you're finding, then either A, you need to find better ones, or B, if that's the best that you can find, maybe this topic isn't worth pursuing. So what about outlining the speech? Now that we have finished choosing a topic and researching, this is when you can finally start putting pen to paper or hands to keyboards to type something up. But this is outlining, not quite writing the speech. Why do we outline instead of just jumping right into drafting or writing? Because you need to create a blueprint for yourself to follow. You are essentially trying not to be your parents who just give you the directions or figure it out on the way when they drive somewhere. You want to at least put it in Google Maps, and then if you decide to change course partway through, it's fine, but you got to have an idea of where you're going to make sure you get there not scratched up. It helps you avoid writer's block of being like, I don't know what to write next, or I'm totally stuck, because you're focused on just one thing. When you have an outline, if you get stuck on one part, you can just jump over to the next part because you've already got a start from the outline, and it doesn't feel as like insurmountable. It also helps you avoid repetition. When you just write instead of following an outline, you end up saying the same thing over and over in different ways, and you end up talking about points that you intended to talk about later earlier, and then it makes it so that you run out of stuff. It also helps you avoid logical leaps and make sure that you're not skipping any of the important things that an original oratory has to prove in order to be persuasive. But remember, outlining does not mean drafting. You should be writing in complete sentences, but usually that just means you should have around one sentence for each major part of the outline or each subcomponent of each major point of the outline. Remember, there are different types of structures for our speeches, and we have to choose a structure when we're outlining to make sure that we cover all of our bases. The most common structures are causes, effects, solutions, or CES, problems, causes, solutions, or PCS, and two prongs, implication solutions, or 2PIS. However, you can use technically any structure you want. It doesn't even have to be 2 to 4 main points. That would just be my recommendation. And luckily for you, I have free outline templates for each of these structures, except for the unique one, because you'd have to come up with it yourself. But you could easily take one of these, copy the homework, keep what you like, and change what you don't. Just make sure you make a copy of it. So when we're outlining our speech, we have to know what we're expected to write about for each of these different structures. Now, each of them has an introduction and a conclusion, but what goes into the 3 to 4 main points in the middle of them is going to change depending on the structure you choose. For problems, causes, solutions, your first main point is typically 2 major problems. Your second point is 2 major causes of those problems. Your third point is the solutions to those problems that can overcome the causes. And then you wrap it up with your conclusion. Under the causes, effects, solutions model, it's similar, except you reverse the order of the first and second point. Your first point establishes why bad things are happening. Your second point gives us the consequences of those bad things, the effects, the impacts of them. And then your third point gives us some solutions. Third, we have the prong 1, prong 2 implication solutions method. This is also called the Apple Valley method because they kind of pioneered it and do it the most often. This usually has prong 1 is like a combined cause and effect, but it's more focused on cause than effect usually. Prong 2 is cause and effect 2. And again, it's usually more focused on like cause than effect. It's like maybe 60-40 for both of them. The third point is implications. Sometimes people combine implications and solution. Sometimes they keep them separate. Sometimes people combine the solutions and the conclusion. Sometimes people keep them separate. But the third point is the implications or the just talk or the heart moment or something like that, where you need to talk to the audience and tell them how these 2 prongs, these causes and effects, really translate to things happening in the real world, whether it be about you, whether it be about a person you know, or whether it be about someone you found on the internet. Usually it is storytelling, and you're really hyper-focused on effects. You, however, also can be focused on the implications of the solutions of how that effect was overcome. And that's part of the way that we avoid trauma dumping in oratory. Then you have your solutions point, just like these other ones, and a conclusion. So if you choose to do a unique structure that you come up with, or if you find someone else's unique structure and follow it, then you're still probably going to have an introduction and a conclusion, but your what's in between is going to change. Some examples of structures I've found other people use that don't follow these other norms are 3 myths or 3 examples. And under each of the 3 main points, you break down the myth, and you're still kind of talking about causes, effects, and solutions for each of the 3 of them. But instead of having them all separated out, like all causes, all effects, all solutions, each point is its own like cause, effect, solution. You can also talk about the past, the present, and the future of something. So how did we get here? What's happening now? And what will happen in the future if we do this or if we don't do this? You can also define the topic that you're talking about, mostly in your first point, go over the positive and negative aspects of what you're talking about in your second, and then offer advice or solutions in the third. Those are some other structures that I've seen, not necessarily common, but things that were publicly available. The other thing to note is that each of your main points, whether it's, problems, causes, solutions, effects, prongs, has a transition into the point, an internal preview where you tell us essentially what you're going to talk about as part of that point, 2 subpoints, sometimes 3, but usually 2, and then an impact statement or an internal review of what you talked about. So when we write each of these subpoints, which if you're following a typical structure of like CES or PCS, or 2 prongs, then each of your subpoints of each main point should typically have these 4 things. You're going to name it, explain it, prove it, and conclude it. When you name it, you are signposting and stating the topic sentence of the subpoint, essentially the mini argument that you are going to try and prove in this segment of your speech. The second step is to explain what you're talking about in your name. You're going to clarify and elaborate on the topic sentence, and perhaps use some evidence to ensure that the audience understands what you're talking about and gets it. Third is you're going to prove it. Use the evidence that you've chosen for this subpoint to support, demonstrate, verify, confirm, validate, and or give credence to the argument that you've just made. And then fourth is conclude it. Tell us how to interpret and respond to the evidence provided and connect this mini argument to proving your speech's overall thesis or to proving the overall point that this subpoint is inside of. So what about the introduction and the conclusion? Because if that's the structure that we're supposed to follow for our problems, causes, solutions, effects, prongs, what about the intro and conclusion? Those are usually pretty similar on no matter what structure you're choosing. Now, you don't necessarily have to have any of those things. Like I said, it's not in the rules. It's just strong advice that seems to work. And the same thing is true for the introduction and conclusion. In my experience, the intros and conclusions that do the best and are the most persuasive and appealing to audiences have all of these elements or most of these elements. So for an introduction, you're going to begin with an attention-getting device or a hook. You don't really want to slap the audience in your face exactly with what your topic is, especially when your topic is about a societal problem and usually something negative, as the very first thing that you say. More commonly, the attention-getting device is lighthearted or funny or interesting, and you're almost doing a sort of bait and switch, where until you segue, which is the next step, into what your topic is, it's not immediately obvious what it's going to be about. But once they hear what your topic is, they'll be like, oh, I see how you connected those things. So that's why the second step is to bridge to your topic or to tie to your topic or to segue to your topic. Transition from the funny or interesting or exciting or shocking thing that you did to catch our attention to what the overall subject of your speech is going to be about. You then need to provide us most of the time with a little bit of background information, maybe a definition, maybe an explanation of what exactly it is that you are talking about during the speech. After you make sure the audience knows what it is that you're talking about, you have to make sure they know why you're talking about it and why they should listen. This is where you provide a statement of significance or you establish the relevance or the importance of something. It's almost like a mini preview of what's to come. A lot of the times it's where we prove how widespread our problem is or how frequent our problem is. We might not be talking about its direct challenges or effects yet, although you can, but you're setting up a need to hear why this is happening, what is it what is it resulting in, and what do we do about it. After that, you're going to give your thesis, which is what we worked on a couple slides ago, the thing that establishes the overall purpose of your speech, telling us what the societal problem is, why we need to fix it, and what you want the audience to do about it. After that, you'll give your preview of main points or your roadmap for the speech, where you tell us what are the 3 to 4 things you're going to talk about before your conclusion. And then sometimes you'll finish with a swag line or almost like an interpy because statement after the roadmap of one sentence that kind of encapsulates an exciting thing for the audience to look forward to or gets them pumped to listen to the rest of your speech. So what about the conclusion? The conclusion is very similar to the introduction. It repurposes a lot of the same elements, but we are going to think about it differently because now we've heard the whole speech. You should begin by transitioning from your solutions to your conclusion. And most of the time, you're going to use your attention-getting device that you started the speech with to do this because it makes the speech come full circle. Then you're going to review and summarize your main points. Some people spend more time on this and other times people spend less. The reason why I think it's important to review or summarize is because it's not like an essay where people can go back and read what you said if they forgot. They only get to hear the speech once. You are also going to restate, probably not word for word, but reiterate or give a similar version, maybe a more fleshed out version of your thesis from the beginning. You will usually issue a final challenge to, or a final action for, or a final request of the audience. What is the number one thing that you want them to walk away remembering, thinking, doing, believing differently than they did before they heard your speech? You'll then give some strong closing thoughts, some things that the audience will keep with them and remember. And then finally, you'll finish with a memorable clincher or final sentence that usually ties back to either your topic of the speech, the speech title, or the thesis of your speech, or some combination of that. Now, while the introduction and the conclusion are incredibly important, we do not want to even begin outlining them, let alone writing them, until the 3 main points are done. It is very hard to introduce something that doesn't exist. It's even harder to conclude something that doesn't exist yet. And if you write your introduction and your conclusion and then you change what the main points are about, most of the stuff that you put in your introduction might not work anymore. If you have an idea for an attention getter, sketch it down somewhere, maybe on your sources page, but don't give in to the desire to write the intro before everything else, because the intro is the thing you're the most likely to get stuck on. And in my experience, is actually the hardest thing to write at the beginning. So, how do we flesh out the speech now that we've got it outlined? We figured out our topic, we did the research, and we outlined it. How long is a speech supposed to be? The shortest that I would recommend your speech being is around 1,050 words. The longest I would recommend your speech being is 1,500 words. Remember, you have 10 minutes, not including the grace period. So if you're at 150 words a minute, that gets you to 1,500 words. For context, 180 words a minute is the speed that a lot of like normal talking debaters talk at, and we typically go shorter than that. Or slower than that. Usually it's going to be between like 1,300 to 1,450 words. This is not a hard and fast rule, but a starting point. Your introduction can be between 200 to 300 words. Each of your main points would be 250 to 325 words, so multiply that by like 3 or 4. And then your conclusion is usually the shortest part of the speech, usually between 75 to 175 words. How do you know how long your speech has to be? The only way to know for sure is to time it. So when you've finished outlining the speech, you can't time it. But as you're writing each point of the speech, you can be checking the word count. And as you're checking the word count, when you finish the first point, time it to make sure that it's not longer than like 2.5 minutes, or at the absolute longest, like 3 minutes, right? And that way you're not having to write double the amount of stuff you need and then get rid of it halfway through, which would be annoying. So you now need to go from a full sentence outline to a scripted draft. How do you do that? How do we transfer from just having a sentence for each part of the outline to having paragraphs for each part of the outline? Well, remember that you want your speech to follow a narrative arc. Even though this isn't interpretation, we still want to be able to see the elements of plot, essentially, or feel the elements of plot in your speech. That usually means that we start lighter and then get heavier. So we start with exposition. We're learning about the fundamentals of the topic. Then you're going to set up the core conflict, the main issue, and then we learn more about it, and that's the rising action. And then usually around the 6 to 8 minute mark, that's when we hit the climax of the speech, the emotional climax. But remember, each point in the speech should have peaks and valleys, moments of high intensity and high stress, moments of low intensity and low stress. So the speech shouldn't look like going up and then crashing down at the end. It's going to look more like a gradual step up and decline, or a gradually increasing size of a wave before then we finally get to calm down. And no singular emotion should usually dominate for longer than 3 or more lines. Now, if you kind of break it down to like the 5 main emotions, think Inside Out: sadness, fear, disgust, anger, joy, then maybe anger can be the idea behind, more than 3 sentences, but it should be different specific forms of anger. Because if it's the same emotion for longer than 3 sentences, then it's all going to sound the same and it's going to get kind of exhausting for the audience. We also go from a full sentence outline to a scripted draft by using research, remembering that roughly 30% should be from outside sources and roughly 70% should be from our own thoughts. 9th is fleshing out your speech. What if you don't know what to write about? Here are some ideas of how you can make it longer. 1 is to refute opposing points. Answer the most likely, the most common, and or the strongest objection to your audience, because if you found it in your research, chances are that you will have judges or audience members who are thinking those exact objections. And if you can answer them even before they've thought of them, then it proves how much of a persuasive speaker you are. Also, I like to imagine a toddler is annoying me. Pretend that there is a small child who, for each of your points, is asking you why, how, what, when, where, who. And if you haven't answered those questions within every sentence of your speech, essentially, if every sentence isn't helping answer one of those questions, then figure out where it is weak right now and add those things to answer those questions from that annoying toddler. 3rd is to humanize it. If you haven't told a story in the speech, whether it's your own or somebody else's, you probably need to do that. You also should probably have at least one real world or pop culture or historical or personal example per subpoint. This helps us build and maintain our pathos. you need to remember to support your thesis. Go back to your thesis whenever you're in doubt about your writing and ask, have I fully proven this yet? If you haven't proven it yet, that's what you need to do. If you've already proven your thesis and the speech is too short, then your thesis might not be expansive or meaningful enough to warrant a full speech, and you might need to add to it to give yourself more to write about. And lastly is to add the bells and whistles. Add humor and rhetorical devices to your writing to make it the most engaging and interesting speech that it possibly can be for audiences. Now, this is kind of difficult, so we're going to talk about both of those things specifically. I have a massive list of rhetorical devices and humor categories and stuff that you can look into to help make sure that your speech is worthwhile and fun to listen to for audiences. All of these things, I will have a paper version that explains them in depth, but there's so many of them and I don't want to waste your time. And there's lots of research online for each one of these things. And no, you do not need all of them in every single speech, but if you're only using a handful of rhetorical devices or you're using the same ones over and over, look at this list and vary it up. If you're only trying to make the audience laugh from one or two types of humor, that's probably why you're not getting as many laughs, or you're getting a lot of laughs from some audiences and almost no laughs from others. So when you are figuring out how to make the speech hit 10 minutes, or the speech is 10 minutes, but people just aren't loving it, that's where you add in, swap out, or change things to be rhetorical devices or elements of humor. I believe it was Andrea Ambam, the national champion in 2014 from America Minus the Dream. In an interview in the rostrum, she was asked, like, what's the key to a winning original oratory? And she said, humor. You have to make people laugh 95% of the time when you're doing original oratory, at least once or twice, to keep them engaged enough and liking you to really want to give you that one, especially because the lighter hearted we feel at times, when we go low with problems and sadness, the lower we feel because we've been high and now we're coming down. So after we've fleshed out the speech, the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps are essentially the process that you're going to be re-engaging in if you keep your topic and you keep your main speech and you keep doing oratory for the rest of the season. So if you can get to step 10 before the season even starts, great. Or before your first tournament even starts, great. So when we edit our speeches, we need to know, why do we do it? Why don't we just write it great the first time and take forever until like the last tournament of the season perfecting it and then only perform it once it's amazing? So the first one is because there's a strategic advantage in memorized speeches and contests versus unmemorized. It is the same reason why there is an advantage to the cases in debate versus the rebuttal speeches. Because when it is memorized, you have 100% control over every single word that you say. And that is not true in any other contest. So if you have 100% control and choice in what you say, then every single word matters. Every single choice matters. Every single word can be evaluated for, is it the most impactful, the most persuasive, the most inspiring, the most devastating that it could be in this moment. Also, a lot of the times, if you compete locally or even nationally, you're going to get judged on this speech by the same person at least once throughout the season. And if you edit your speech between the times they first see it and the next time they see it, it shows the judge that you are listening to their feedback. Even if you didn't make the exact changes they recommended, if they notice other changes, judges like giving higher rankings and higher ratings to speeches that they feel are improving continuously versus people who started at the top and then never changed, or people who started at the bottom and then never changed. It also helps make sure that your delivery doesn't get stale. When we hit the January, February mark, a lot of people's speeches just aren't sounding as good anymore and they're not doing as well anymore. And a lot of the times that's because they're stale. When we edit our speech throughout the whole season, then it always feels fresh. It also helps you avoid autopiloting, which is a problem of when you've been doing it the same way. This is where I describe it as you're giving your speech at a tournament and you realize halfway through that you're not even thinking about what you're saying. You've been thinking about what you're going to eat, a show that you saw, how your teammates are doing, whether or not you think you're winning. And you're like, I hope that I'm still giving my speech correctly. And you're like, wait, what part am I even on? And even if you don't mess up, you're not invested in it and the audience can feel it in your delivery. So don't let yourself autopilot. If you're starting to autopilot, your speech needs to change. It also helps make sure that we're adhering to time limits. Sometimes as we go on, our speeches are getting faster or our speeches are getting longer. And so we have to edit the speech to make sure that we're not going over the grace period or that we're going so far under 10 minutes that it's starting to affect our performance. It also helps you keep things relevant. Sometimes we include pop culture or examples or real world examples or news or current events in our speeches. And if you write it in June or in July or August, chances are it won't be relevant by the time we hit nationals the next June. So there's something more relevant or more recent that comes up. You also, if you travel around the country or around your state to compete and you have examples that you want to change depending on where you go, it's very common to have examples that are specific to the town or to the state or to the region that you go to perform in, to make sure that the judges who are from there and the audiences that are from there will feel connected to it. So we edit these speeches before we even memorize them in the first place, right? And we edit them before we kind of get to like the final draft or the first final draft of our first tournament. But after we've done that, then there's different types of revisions. Once you've competed with a speech at a tournament, you've memorized the first draft, there's a lot of different types of revisions. The first type is an overhaul revision. That is where you are doing a really big change. You are changing your thesis to something similar but different. You are changing, the points that you're making themselves, swapping out a subpoint, swapping out having entirely different causes, effects, or solutions, changing a prong. Those are really big revisions. Those most likely happen after you realize that something just isn't working, and that a lot of judges are all saying the exact same thing, or your coaches are telling you the same thing over and over. An addition revision is when the speech is too short or you have more room, and so you add something to what was already there. An evidence revision is when you swap out sources of support for your speech for something different and better. A cut revision is when the speech is too long or there's something in there that is harming the speech, so you need to get rid of it. A detail revision is when one of the supporting examples or one of just the bits of analysis that you say in one of your points needs to be swapped out for something different. A language revision is when we are changing specific words, maybe not ideas, but the words we're using to convey those ideas to make them more impactful. A flourish revision is when we're changing the rhetorical devices that we're using. We're changing the jokes that we're using to add the bells and whistles and make them better in our speech. And then we have structure and organization revisions. This is when we're changing the order. Maybe instead of problems, causes, solutions, we change it to causes, effects, solutions. Or we, swap the order of our solutions around. Or we're changing the transitions of our speeches. All of those would be examples of revisions to the structure and organization. And chances are you'll make at least one of these types of revisions throughout the season, at least once for each of them. And if you're not, unless you're winning every single tournament against really strong competition in front of a variety of judges, in which case, I guess, great job. Maybe you followed this advice perfectly and you got it right from the beginning. It's going to fade eventually. So you should always be revising. How do you know what to cut or what to add? You should cut or add things when you are having logical leaps or gaps that like the audience isn't filling the blank in on, or when you're saying the same thing in multiple different places, right? You only get 10 minutes, so why repeat minute 1 and minute 9? Then you also need to evaluate everything that's in your speech, not just on like a is it good or is it bad, but on like a terrible, meh, fine, good, better, best mentality. What I mean by that is every single idea that you have is going to fall somewhere along a spectrum of like how good it is. And don't think that just because something is good means that it should stay the same. Because if you only get 10 minutes, if you say something good, it means that there's not enough time to instead have said something better or to have said the best version of that thing. So for every word, every sentence, every point, every idea, you can look at it and be like, it's working, but could it be better? And if the answer is yes, move it one space along on the continuum, right? You also should ask yourself, what purpose does this thing that I'm thinking about adding or thinking about getting rid of fulfill in my speech? And if the answer is not blatantly obvious or clear or good, then you probably shouldn't add it, or you should probably get rid of it and find something that does answer that question. And lastly, you should be thinking about word economy and efficiency versus stylistic appeal. We want to make sure that we are not saying something that only takes 10 words to say persuasively in 20, but we also don't want to say it in 5. You need to make sure that each idea is expressed with enough words to really connect with and impact and persuade the audience, but not so many that you're not getting, it's kind of like a curve on a graph that at a certain point, you're not getting that much more return for how many more words you're having to use, or with how few words that you're giving, even if the idea is good, it's not impacting the audience. So it's not really like achieving full utility. So think about these things when you're thinking about adding or cutting things. Lastly, how do you know what you should change, especially if your ballots are bad, if you're not really getting coached, if you're doing really well? How do you know what to change in your oratory? My first piece of advice would be to read it out loud and record it, and then listen to the recording of the speech. That will tell you so much. The earlier you do this, the better. You'll realize, oh, that sounded better in my head, or oh, that sounded better on paper, but when I read it out loud or when I heard myself say it, it doesn't sound great. You can also give the written draft of your speech and the recording to your coach or your English teachers, to your parents, to your teammates, to your friends, and get their advice on it. You can ask yourself with your speech what's working, what isn't working, and what's missing. Those are like 3 questions that after every single tournament you can ask yourself those, because you can turn up what is working, you can replace what isn't working, and you can add what's missing. Reading your ballots is also really helpful. Read your ballots from like across the whole season. Don't only read your ballots when you're on the bus ride home and you're looking to be angry or you're looking to like feel cool about yourself because you won. Read your ballots after you're no longer emotionally attached to them, and read your ballots in context. Look at your ballots from across tournaments. And if judges are saying the same thing over and over again, or if a judge said something the first time and they're still saying it the second time, that can tell you what you need to change. You can also ask on every sentence, is this the best possible way to say this idea? This question is usually the best right before, or not right before, but decently partway through the season before you get to your qualifying and your championship tournaments. At the beginning, if you ask yourself what's the best possible way to say this idea when you're first writing or when you're first outlining, then you're going to get paralyzed by fear and indecision. Step 11 out of the 12 we'll talk about in this video is you need to memorize your speech. Memorization is essential in oratory for long-term success and to avoid breaking the rules. So memorization can be very easy for some people who have been doing speech and debate for a long time, people from the theater world, people who have to memorize like flashcards and words and terminology for classes. But for other people, it's really difficult. So here are my biggest strategies and tips for memorizing. The first thing I would tell you is that you need to try and memorize sentence by sentence first. Before trying to memorize your entire introduction, you got to just memorize the first sentence of that introduction. So my tip, the best way to memorize in my experience, is time consuming, but it is very effective and leads to the fewest amount of slip-ups. I think you get the most bang for your buck. My tip is to read a sentence out loud 3 times to myself. So I'll be reading it on paper or reading it on a computer, and then the 4th time that I say it, I close my eyes or I flip the computer a little bit, or I turn the paper over and I try to recite the sentence without reading it. But because I've read it out loud 3 times, it's in my brain enough that I can make sure that I've got it. Then I go back to reading it to make sure I didn't have any errors, and then I say it again without reading it. And by that point, that sentence is in my mind. Then, when I try to read the second sentence, before I let myself read the second sentence, I have to say the first sentence. So I repeat the first sentence from memory, I read the second sentence 3 times, I repeat the first and second sentence, and then I read the second sentence again. Then when I get to the third sentence, I give the second sentence from memory, read the third 3 times, recite the second and the third, read the third, recite the second and the third. Then I go to the fourth, recite the third, read the fourth 3 times, right? So you connect each previous sentence that has been memorized to the new sentence that you were memorizing. And that links everything together so that the end of a sentence is your cue for the beginning of the next one. And while this can be time consuming, if I make a goal of only having to memorize 1 main point or 1 sub point per day, very doable, and the memorization actually lasts, which is nice. The next step, after you've memorized it by sentence, is memorizing it in chunks. So get your attention getter and your tie into topic perfectly memorized before you're trying to memorize your background and your thesis in your introduction. Memorize your problem 1 before you memorize your problem 2. Memorize in chunks, and then only when this chunk is right, add the second chunk. That doesn't work if you're memorizing the night before, which is why you should not memorize the night before. So if you're my students and you're trying to memorize this the night before, why are you watching this video the night before a tournament? It's too late. Try your best, I guess. Third is to memorize by points. Once you've got the entire introduction down, that's when you're allowed to try memorizing your first point. But if you haven't memorized what comes before it, don't memorize what comes after it. So memorize all of introduction, then all of point 1, then all of point 2, so on and so forth. Here are some helpful memorization tips in addition to those things. One useful tip that will help you with your delivery as well is to memorize by color. What I mean by this is to highlight each sentence in your speech in a different color or a different pattern of colors, based on the emotion that it is primarily leaning into or conveying. And that will help you when you're reading it from memory to start internalizing those emotions and to rehearse saying different flavors of those emotions as you're speaking. And connecting delivery and emotion to the content can help you memorize the content better as well. You can also create a cue word script. Now, what this looks like is when you're mostly kind of memorized, like you've got most of the ideas, but you're not quite sure, you know that you're still messing up in some places, or there's this one section that's always tripping you up. What I do is I highlight the last couple of words in each sentence, beginning with like only the last 2 or 3 words on a different copy of my document. I highlight all of those in white so that they don't show up in the document. Then I read through the script and see if my brain can fill in the last few words. And if it can't fill in the last few words, I just select over it with my cursor and then I see what the letters are because they, turns white text over blue background instead of white text over white background. I rememorize those words and then I try again. Once I'm confident that I can get it without having to read the last few words, then I highlight a few more words in each sentence in white. So now it's only like the first half of each sentence is visible. And then I go through the process of reading it and seeing if I can get all of it again. And then you keep going and you keep going and you keep going until eventually you've got a version of your script where only the first word in each sentence is highlighted. And if you can give your speech from memory with only the first word from each sentence highlighted, then you're almost perfectly memorized. Then I start removing every other sentence's first word. And then I only have 1 out of every 3 sentences first word. And then eventually that's a great test of whether or not you're really, really memorized. And if you keep all these different versions when you go on a winter break or you haven't practiced your speech in a couple of days and you need to rememorize, rememorizing off of these versions is better than trying to rememorize from the full version of the document. The next tip I'd give is lip syncing your speech. In the same way that a lot of us learn the words to songs on the radio by listening along to them, lip syncing to them, and then singing along to them, do that with your speech. Once you're confident that this is the version of the speech that I'm going to memorize, I'm not making any other changes, record it again, listen to the recording over and over and over again in the morning, at night, in between classes, when your teacher lets you listen to music, listen to your speech instead, and mouth along with your own voice to the words. And then eventually talk along like you were singing along to the speech as well, just like if it was on the radio. You can also assist the help of a friend or family member or coach and make them be a line caller, but I think that this is sometimes less effective. Only really do this if it's proven to work for you, but give a copy of your speech to someone else and recite the speech to them and have them cut you off or remind you if you slip up or forget. This is not really great as like a practice in front of them technique. It's kind of a waste of both of your times. But if you're like not fully trying to practice, you're just trying to make sure that you're memorized. And so, you're walking back and forth, you're not really timing it, that's fine. Lastly is you have to give yourself time. If you're like, how do I memorize my speech the night before? It's really hard. Well, duh, it's really hard. Don't do that. And if, you're like, well, I don't have another choice. Great. Maybe tomorrow you don't have a choice, but you should never be memorizing the night before a tournament ever again after the first time that you've done it. You need to make a goal of being fully memorized at least 5 days before a tournament. I know that that's difficult. So if you can't be fully memorized at least 5 days before a tournament, then don't try and make new changes that you're going to be performing at said tournament. Save them for the future. Okay. Also, try not to have to memorize more than 1 point worth of information a day. If you have to memorize more than 300 words a day, that is so hard, and the likelihood that you're going to mess up on a couple of words in each of those sections or more than a couple of words is way higher. But if on day 1 you fully memorize your intro, on day 2 you rehearse your intro and then fully memorize your point 1, then it's less likely that each individual point has slip-ups, okay? And then everything will be better connected together. So, for example, if you have a competition on Friday, you should be memorizing, or let's say that the first competition is in 2 weeks. The Monday before or 2 Mondays before the first competition, you memorize your intro, and then your first point, and then your second point, and then your third point, and then your conclusion. And then you have a full week of it being fully memorized. If you have a week being fully memorized, a week to practice being fully memorized, and then you go to a competition, you're going to blow everyone else out of the water, especially if it's at the beginning of the season. So the last section of this video is for now that we've got a good speech. We picked a topic, we researched it, we outlined it, we fleshed it out, we edited it, and we memorized it. How do we rehearse and deliver the speech? So you need to focus on being a human in your delivery. You don't want to sound like a robot. You don't want to sound like a speech kid. Your delivery should reflect your personality, and it needs to be a combination or a middle ground between conversational and professional. Throughout your speech, you're probably going to sound like different versions of yourself, or you can role play as different versions of yourself to make sure that you're varying the delivery. Sometimes you're going to sound like a credible expert. Sometimes you're going to talk to the audience like they're a friend. Sometimes you're going to sound like an enthusiast or a comedian or a preacher or an inspirer. All of those different roles, all of those different, personality lean-ins are what you're going to be embracing throughout your speech to try and vary your delivery and not sound like a robot. How do we practice for humanness? If you've been accused of sounding like a robot or you sound like a speech kid and you're not sure how to stop, you need to focus on friendliness and on emotional variety. So how do we practice friendliness? Give your speech to someone sitting down like you are at, or actually do it at a coffee shop, and pretend like you're just having a conversation where the other person has agreed to listen to you for 10 minutes. How would you say it to them sitting down next to them like a friend at a coffee shop? And whatever things you learn from that are things that afterwards they like from that, keep doing those things. You can also call a friend on the phone and talk to them like you're just chatting up with a friend over the phone, or FaceTime a friend and give them the speech and talk to them like you talk to your friends when you're FaceTiming, not like a robot or like someone who's trying to earn a judge's one. You can talk to your friends in the hallway at school, pretending as though like, how do you talk to your friends between classes? And you can give the speech with a friend or with a family member while you're doing a fun task, like while you are coloring or while you're playing video games or while you're playing sports in the backyard and things like that. All of those are ways to practice being friendly in your delivery. Next is emotional variety. I like to, when I'm not sure that a sentence is working, say each sentence leading or emphasizing or leaning into a different emotion until I hear the right one. So I'll say a sentence angry, and then I'll say it sad, and then I'll say it happy, and then I'll say it disgusted, and then I'll say it afraid. Oh, afraid sounded the best. Well, what if I am nervous? What if I am anxious? What if I am and try and play around with different flavors or varieties of that emotion. And that will help you make sure that you are leaning into the right message. You can also ask yourself, what do I want the audience to feel after they hear this? And if you want the audience to feel a certain way, one way you can help do that is by yourself feeling that way and sounding like you feel that way about that line of your speech. Sometimes we become detached from the words that we're saying, and if you are detached from the words that you're saying, your audience will be detached from the words that you are saying. So the biggest things about rehearsal and delivery is we've got vocal delivery and we've got physical delivery. There should be entire practices or practice speeches where you are entirely focused on doing drills to improve a couple or even just one element of your vocal delivery and one element of your physical delivery. While this is just one slide, this is a huge part of original oratory, but you can't effectively practice it until everything else is done. You can't control your vocal and your physical delivery until you've controlled everything else. Because when you're struggling to think about what comes next in your speech because you're not really memorized, you can't really focus your energy instead on how you're saying it or what your body looks like and is doing while you're saying it. So for vocal delivery, these are all different things that you can factor, practice, and keep in mind as you are rehearsing and as you're speaking in front of judges and coaches. The rate or pace is the speed of the spoken words that you say. Pausing by having intentional silences for effect. Volume or production, how loud are you and how far does your voice reach in a room? Pitch, the highness or lowness of your voice. Tone, the emotional color of your voice. Articulation, the proper formation of sounds. Enunciation, the clarity of the spoken words, which is sounds put together. Pronunciation, the correctness of the sounds of the words. Fluency, smooth or uninterrupted flow of your speech, making sure you're not having fillers or relapses of memory and things like that. Filler words, unnecessary sounds or words like and inflection, your vocal pitch variation. Breath control, you manage when you breathe in and out during the speech to avoid distraction or to make sure that you can go for as long as you want. And then energy level, how lively and intense is your voice? Those are all things to think about with what you're doing with your voice. You can practice that by recording your speech with different emphases on each of these things, and then listen to a version like A/B testing. Okay, if I say it at this speed versus this speed, which one sounds better? If I say it at this tone versus this tone, which one sounds better? And all of those can help you have better vocal delivery. Then we can look at physical delivery. All of these are things that go into what you are doing that does not involve your words or the sounds that are coming out of your mouth. This could be hand gestures, which is how you move your hands and fingers for emphasis. And remember to stay inside the gesture zone, which, if you're not sure what that is, hold your arms out straight in front of you like you're Frankenstein at about shoulder level, then bring them outwards just past your shoulders, then kind of cut downwards like you're drawing the outline of a box, and stop it around your belly button, and then bring them inwards. That square is generally where your gesture should stay, unless you're doing a gesture like, like raising your hand. But we don't want to look like an inflatable car salesman, and we also don't want to gesture below the waist, because then we have people looking where we don't want them to look. If you gesture inside the box, then people can continue looking at your gestures and your face at the same time, which is what we want. You should also think about your facial expressions. This was really difficult for me. My face was mostly blank when I gave speeches in high school. And if you're saying something and your voice sounds really angry, but your face doesn't look angry, it's very uncanny and weird for audiences. So you can practice in front of a mirror or in front of someone else, or watch the recording of your face and see what it looks like. But this is how you show emotion and thought, through your eyes, your eyebrows, your mouth, your nose, your head tilt, etc. Your posture of your body is also very important and communicates different things. Generally, we want an upright, open, and confident stance, but we also generally want to avoid leaning and hunching our shoulders. But you can purposefully adopt these things or change your body posture to change the meaning of what you're saying. It's the same reason why interpreters change their body posture to show differences in characterization. The way that you use space is also important. Most of the time, you're going to be embracing the speaker's diamond, where unless you're moving between a major point or moving from one sub point to a next, you're not really walking around. We don't pace around like TED Talkers do in original oratory, but how you use the space, how much walking you do, how far you're walking, how wide of a stance and how wide of gestures you take are all part of your use of space. Eye contact, where is your gaze when you are looking at the audience, making sure that you are holding eye contact for long enough to establish a connection, but not so long to make people uncomfortable. Looking up and down and around can be distracting. One tip for if you find eye contact really awkward is to look in between the judge's eyebrows instead of directly into their eyes, and then it feels like you're still making eye contact, but you're less likely to feel awkward. You can also think about proxemics. How close and far away do you want to be to the audience when you say certain things, as that can have an effect. The orientation of your body, of which way you're facing. Do you want to be directly facing the audience, straight forward the whole time? Are there going to be times where you turn your body to focus on different parts of the room? You don't want to neglect with your eye contact or with your body posture entire zones of the room, especially if you've got judges that are spread out and not just front and center. And lastly is distractors, right? A lot of the times we're playing with our hands, we're playing with our face, we're playing with our hair, with our clothing, we're rocking back and forth, or we're swaying from side to side. And all of those things can be distracting, and we want to think about them when we are rehearsing our speeches. Now that we've gone through the 12 parts of how to do original oratory well, here are my best resources for learning and going further. I consulted around 50 resources to be able to make this video, and so I would not be doing my job if I didn't tell you where I got this information from, and where, if you need more specific advice or to go in depth, you can get more. First up, look at the original oratory textbook. I know that a lot of the times textbooks are a total waste of time. That is not true with the NSDA's textbook. The oratory textbook is phenomenal. It was updated within the last couple of years. It goes really in depth on most of the stuff that I talked about here. Also, whether you're a student, a coach, or a judge, you should look into the Introduction to Coaching Original Oratory, an informative course that Speech and Debate has put out on speechanddebate.org/learn. The NSDA Learn courses are amazing, and this one is no exception. Additionally, whether you're a student, a teacher, or a coach, they have a curriculum series all about teaching public address events, which includes original oratory and informative speaking. And you can look at the exercises and lessons and examples they have for original oratory and learn from them. Perhaps the best thing you can do if you are advanced or if you are just starting out is watch finals round speeches. And they have all of the original oratory high school finals rounds in one place if you click on that link. And there's lots of webinars that have been made from experts in original oratory. National champions, coaches of champions have put out videos and resources that you can find most of at the link that I've pasted there. Additionally, if you are maybe not part of the National Speech and Debate Association, or if you don't have access to the resource package, which you really should, it's fantastic, you can look at these YouTube resources. Justin Cooper is a former national finalist, I believe. He might have been a champion, but I'm not sure. And he has a YouTube page with dozens of videos dedicated exclusively to original oratory with lots of great advice. So you can check out those. There's also, if you're more of a teacher or if you're on the educating or coaching side, a YouTube series which is about 15 days of writing an original oratory from start to finish. I don't believe it includes memorization, that kind of breaks down the process for students. And you can kind of check that out to kind of see, okay, what exactly am I asking my students to do? Students, you can also check that out to give yourself a how do I go from having nothing to having an oratory ready to memorize in 15 days. And then lastly, I have a Google Doc where I am keeping a running list of all of the original oratory speeches online that I can find, organized by the type of structure that they use. And I've got over 20 of them. So you can check those out as well from that Google Doc link. We are near the end of this video, so I want to finish by sharing some of my resources that I've created for original oratory and giving you my final thoughts and closing advice. So resources that I've made include a really in-depth rubric for how I judge original oratory and for how you can judge yourself or your students on original oratory to figure out where you're strong and where you can improve. Then I have a checklist that's all about how to prepare an original oratory, essentially from start to the beginning of your first tournament. So you can use this from the summer until you perform at the first tournament, or if you start doing oratory halfway through the year to just get you an idea of everything you need to do before you're ready to perform at a tournament. Coaches can also use it as like sort of a checklist thing before kids are allowed to compete. I have a topic approval form that you can use with yourself or with your coaches or with your teacher to make sure that before you start investing in a topic fully, doing all of the research, doing all of the outlining, that the topic is good enough and headed in the right direction to make any of the rest of the stuff worth it. I've also made a checklist for what you can do over your winter break at different levels of like how much of a debate nerd you are, or like how much of a good grade you want to get on your prep, from what is the bare minimum of what you need to do over winter break to be ready to come back and compete in oratory, to what are you going to do over winter break if your goal is to come back and be like a state or national champion. And then I have fill in the blank outlines for the problem causes solution structure, the causes effect solution structure, and the two-prong implication solution structure as well, all of which you can check out on the links on this page on the left. What is my miscellaneous advice for original oratory? For why you should listen to me, I love original oratory. It's probably my favorite or second favorite speech event. I did it my junior and senior year of high school. I was second place my junior year at the Idaho State Championships. Here's what I think about oratory. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, originate it. What I mean is figure out what has worked for you and for other people in the past, and then make it your own. So don't copy it or do it the exact same way, but make it your own in a new way. Ask yourself as you are preparing and competing in oratory, what do you really want? Because there's two main focuses. There's wanting to make real world change, and there's wanting to win. And both of those are totally valid goals. And they're not necessarily incompatible, but they are Venn diagrams that don't always have 100% overlap. And sometimes, whether it's figuring out your topic or what examples you want to use, or even just how you want to deliver it, you have to ask yourself, what is going to make me have the most fun? What is going to make me spread the most awareness? What is going to say what needs to be said or make some people feel really seen but upset other people, versus what is going to get you the win? And sometimes you have to ask yourself, if you're not sure what else to do, which of those two or three things between having fun, spreading a message, and winning are you going to value most in that moment or in that part of your speech? You can also remember who your audience likely is. If sometimes we write because we want to impress our teammates, or because we want to impress our coaches, or because we want to impress our competitors who are watching us. But your audience is potentially coaches, potentially teachers, potentially administrators, bus drivers, parents, lay people, non-debate people, liberals, conservatives, teenagers, college students, old people. You have to think, my judge could be anyone. And if my judge could be anyone, then I need to write this speech to appeal to anyone, or 95% of people, right? Generally is what you have to do if you want to win more often than not. Maybe you want to write your speech to only appeal to 5% of people because that's the 5% of people that really need to hear it, and that's fine. But you have to think of who is your audience and write it centered around them, because while, yes, original oratory is great for self-empowerment, your goal should be that you can feel as inspired as the people that will be listening to you as well. And so if no one except you is going to like or learn anything from or be persuaded by your speech, you're kind of minimizing its potential to both win and inspire and persuade. Learn from the best of the best. Watch the people on your team, from your circuit, from your state, and from the country who are the best at original oratory. Watch college persuasive speaking. Watch as many NSDA finals rounds from the past 10, 15, 20 years as you can, and figure out what are the people that are doing well that I want to emulate doing. But also, don't just stay the same and don't stagnate. Sometimes when you follow really good advice from the beginning, you start winning, and then you're like, well, if I'm winning now, why would I change it? So I want to keep it the exact same. But if you stay the exact same for the first half of the season, almost always the second half of your season will not go as well. But if you have established a pattern of, even when I win, I am going to make my speech better because my goal is for my speech to be better, not just to earn first place, then you will win by bigger and bigger margins and against better and better opponents. And if you never change unless you start losing, then the people who began the season losing are going to start learning how to make their speech better and better and better, and eventually they'll pass you. Give yourself time to make changes. Sometimes you have tournaments back to back to back to back, and that is really difficult. Consider taking a break from your speech, or consider taking a weekend off, or consider doing a different speech event for a while, or trying not to go 8 weeks in a row with the exact same speech. Because if you need to make changes and make improvements, but you're also a student who competes in other activities, or who has a job, or who has AP classes, or family responsibilities, or a social life, which most of you hopefully have most of those things, it's very hard to make meaningful changes and even small changes when you're competing back to back to back to back. So consider saying, if I'm competing 2 weekends in a row, then I will not be making changes to my speech in terms of the script until after those 2 weeks is over, right? If you can give yourself 5 days from the time that you make changes until you next have to perform, that's like the bare minimum amount of time. So what I mean by that is, if your competition is over on Friday, then you have until the end of Sunday night to make changes and then rememorize them for the next 5 days before the tournament after that. You should never be trying to make big changes to your speech the night before or even 2 nights before, unless you have nothing going on and can dedicate 100% of your time to adopting those changes. Learn from your competitors. The people who are competing with you, whether you are beating them or not, or whether they are beating you or not, are people that you can learn from. What are things that they do that are good that you want to find your version of that thing? What is it? Making the audience laugh? Is it making the audience cry? Is it hand gestures? Is it their vocal delivery? Figure out what are they good at, and then think, how can I change to also be good at that thing? You don't need to be good in the same way that they are good at that thing, but learn from your competitors. If you don't break, watch the finals rounds. If you do break, watch the finals rounds. When you are watching your competitors' speeches, genuinely be a good audience member. Pretend that you were the judge of every round that you are in. Have notes that you're taking during people's speeches to figure out what's working for them and what's not working for them, and same thing for yourself. Don't give in to trends in original oratory and speech in general unless they serve you. There is a trend of trauma dumping. There is a trend of having to share really private personal stories. And we saw some amazing speeches in finals last year that critiqued those exact practices for really good reasons. And those were trends that I used to embrace as a coach, that now that I'm realizing, wait a second, we don't have to embrace those trends. So while there are norms and expectations that can help you succeed in original oratory, only follow them if they do help you succeed, whatever that looks like for you in original oratory. Otherwise, be original and buck the trend. I would also say avoid trauma dumping of your own trauma or other people's, because it's bad for you and it's bad for the judges and the audience involved. And avoid commodifying your own suffering. You should not think of, wow, I can use these horrible things that have happened to me to like get a win. The only, like, every minute that is spent sharing something traumatic or horrible or awful needs another minute dedicated to specifically how you overcame, or the other person overcame, or worked through, or moved past, or built upon that trauma. Otherwise, it's more harmful than it is beneficial. You need to follow through with your original oratory's message in the real world. This is the biggest thing that I'd recommend. If the point of your oratory is to change the world, and the only time you're trying to change the world is when you are in that classroom in front of one person as a judge, then you aren't doing enough, and you're not learning enough, and you're not building enough upon it. Do your own solutions. If you are not doing the solutions that you are telling the audience to do, then it's fake, then it's not real. You have to be willing to practice what you preach and put your money where your mouth is. If you would not do what you are asking the audience to do, or if you are contributing to the very problems that you're talking about, then you need to take a serious look at yourself in the mirror and ask why. If you don't care about what it is that you have to say and you just want to win, there are plenty of other events that you can do that. This is not the place. And lastly, have fun. The point of speech and debate is to have fun. Like there's lots of other purposes, but if you are not having fun, you need to ask yourself why and figure it out. Is it the event? Is it your topic? Is it a point of your speech? Is it because it's been the same for too often? Is it because you're not winning? Is it because you're winning too often? Figure out why it's not fun if it's not, and then change it. And even if you are having fun, figure out how to have even more fun with it. You're in high school. You have the rest of your life to make money and to make change. You only have so much time in your life where a primary goal of yours can be missing school to have fun, for example. So, with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video on how to original oratory, understanding, preparing, and succeeding in this event. This is part 1 of my overall speech series guide. The next video should be about informative speaking. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to make sure that you are here for future videos. I wish you the best of luck in original oratory, and have a good rest of your day.